The day Gary Vance brought me home from the underground auction, he looked down at me and said coldly, "I bought you because I needed a new plaything. Don't get any ideas and think I'm still hung up on you." I knew he'd always resented me for breaking off our engagement when he was at his lowest point. So after that, no matter how much he seemed to spoil me, I never forgot my place. I was just his plaything. And a plaything's child has no right to be born, so I kept my pregnancy a secret from him. The day he went to pick up his old flame from the airport, I didn't make a scene. I knew my place and quietly left. I thought he wouldn't care whether I stayed or went. But later, I heard that Gary Vance had gone mad that night, tearing apart the entire city of San Francisco, just to find the lover who had suddenly disappeared. I was lazing on the sofa, scrolling through videos on my phone. The first thing that popped up when I opened the app was a video of Gary. He'd been at a business summit for the past few days, and tons of photos and videos of him were all over the internet. His ridiculously good looks and physique had a legion of new admirers calling him their man, all dreaming of being Mrs. Vance. But it didn't take long for a sharp-eyed fan to notice something. During an interview, Gary had a very obvious bite mark on his neck. The same fans who had been swooning over him were now crying heartbreak, their comments filled with envy. Who is this woman living the dream? She actually got to bite the great Gary Vance's neck. Right? And she really went for it. The mark hasn't faded in days. Reading the comments, I could feel my face flush. I couldn't help but think back to the night before he left for the summit. He'd held me like a child, unleashing his energy with relentless passion, claiming he needed to get his fill for the next few days all in one night. It was too much for me. I cried and begged him to stop, but he just cooed at me and kept going. Furious, I opened my mouth and sank my teeth into his neck. But the pain didn't stop him. If anything, it only made him more excited. Let's just say that by the end of the night, he had nearly tormented me to death. The next morning, Gary stood in front of the mirror for a long time, stroking the bite mark on his neck. I thought he was trying to figure out how to cover it up. So I walked over, feeling a little guilty. "I'm sorry," I said. "Let me cover it with some concealer." Gary answered instinctively, "No need. I like it this way." A moment later, he realized it was me who had spoken. He paused for 2 seconds, his expression turning cold. "Don't get the wrong idea. I just mean it'll ward off a lot of unnecessary trouble." My mood instantly deflated. So he just wanted to use it as a shield. And here I was, thinking he actually liked the mark I'd left on him. Snapping back to reality, I looked at my phone. In the video, a reporter, acting as a mouthpiece for his online fans, asked Gary, "Mr. Vance, are you married?" Gary usually ignored personal questions like this. But this time, he smiled and said, "Not yet, but it should be soon." The reporter got excited. "Wow, how wonderful. We're all dying to know, what is your fiancée like?" Gary replied, "If she says yes, I'll introduce her to everyone." My heart skipped a beat. I was stunned. Who was he going to propose to? To me? Just then, I overheard the maids talking. "Did you hear? I think Mississippi Liang is coming back to the country soon." The flicker of joy I'd felt was instantly extinguished, as if doused by a bucket of cold water. Of course. How could he possibly propose to me? One was the person who kicked him when he was down. The other was the one who reached out a helping hand in his darkest hour and pulled him from the mud. Anyone would know who to choose. My father and Gary's father were college classmates. Since Gary and I were born on the same day in the same hospital, our parents made a casual pact to have us marry someday. Later, as the Vance family became more and more powerful in New York City, my dad got ambitious. He decided to make that casual childhood promise a reality. Before I met Gary for the first time, my dad drilled me over and over, telling me I had to be on my best behavior and make Gary like me. I threw a little tantrum. No way. Only a dog would try that hard to please someone. But who would have thought that in the next second, would see Gary walking toward me from the doorway. His skin was fair, his features delicate. He was so handsome he looked like a little prince straight out of a fairy tale. I changed my mind right then and there. Forget being shy, I was all in. I rushed up to Gary, my eyes sparkling. "Hi, little big brother. My name is Chloe Summers. What's your name?" Gary looked at me warily and didn't answer. Seeing this, I continued, "My dad said you and I were betrothed when we were born. And since we're betrothed, that means you're my future husband. Plus, your last name is Vance, so from now on, I'll just call you Gary Hubby. Gary Hubby. Gary Hubby." I giggled, chanting it several times. Gary froze, a faint blush creeping up his pale, delicate cheeks. The adults around us turned their gazes toward the two of us little kids. Seeing that I was about to shout it again, Gary quickly clapped a hand over my mouth, looking incredibly embarrassed. "You, stop shouting, and I'll tell you. My name is Gary Vance." He took his hand away. He must have thought that telling me his name would stop me from calling him hubby. But in the next second, I declared loudly, "Gary Hubby, your name is so beautiful." Gary's face turned an even deeper shade of red. How can you be like this?" he said, flustered and annoyed, before turning on his heel and storming off. I immediately ran after him. "Gary Hubby, don't go. Wait for me." And so, I followed him around relentlessly until our families officially finalized our engagement. But I, the same girl who used to trail behind him shouting hubby and promising to marry him when I grew up, was the one who showed up at his door to break off the engagement shortly after his father passed away and his family's business was nearly destroyed by outsiders. For Gary at that time, it was another devastating blow. I don't think I'll ever forget that day. He had been so happy to see me, only for his face to crumble with despair the moment I said the words "break off the engagement." After that, he came to my house many times to find me. Just to see me. He would stand outside my gate every day for hours on end. Rain or shine, he stubbornly refused to leave. My father asked me, "Do you want to see him?" I suppressed the pain in my heart. After a long moment, I managed to choke out, "No." My father smiled, very pleased. "That's my good, sensible daughter." Later, my father, fed up with Gary's persistence, hired people in my name to drive him away, humiliating him with the most vicious, cutting words imaginable. It was brutally effective. After that day, Gary Vance disappeared from my life completely. I thought our lives would never cross paths again. But then my dad's investments failed, and he racked up over $100 million in debt. Unable to bear the pressure, he threw himself into the river and died. My uncle's family pretended to take me in, only to sell me at an underground auction. The day Gary brought me home from that auction, he looked down at me and said coldly, "I bought you because I needed a new plaything. Don't get any ideas and think I'm still hung up on you." Of course, I knew he hated me. So I always remembered my place as his plaything. But later, I heard from someone else that back then, when Gary had just wrestled back control of the Vance family business and his position was still unstable, he had made an enemy of the powerful Rivera family just to buy me. And the terrible fate that later befell my uncle's family? That was his doing, too. All these things, one after another, made me unable to stop fantasizing. Maybe, just maybe, Gary still liked me. I shook my head, telling myself not to be so delusional again. If Gary Vance had someone he liked, it could only be Riley Leong, the heir to the Leong Group, the only one who had offered him a lifeline when he had nowhere else to turn. "What are you thinking about?" A familiar, deep voice suddenly came from above me. I looked up and met Gary's gaze. I froze for a second, then answered instinctively, "You." Gary raised an eyebrow. He sat down beside me and gently pinched my cheek. "Trying to seduce me?" "Ha. I'm gone for a few days on business, and your little tricks have gotten more advanced." My face grew hot. He always loved to tease me like this. When I first came to live with him, I bumped into him right after I got out of the shower. He stared at me, his eyes dark, and said, "Who are you trying to seduce, dressed like that?" I looked down, completely baffled. I was wearing a long-sleeved, long-panted pajama set. Another time, I dissolved a vitamin C tablet in a glass of water to give to him. He curled his lip in a cold sneer. Trying to drug me? Heh, so you really do have impure intentions. After so many times, I've learned to just shut up and not explain myself. Because even if I did, he wouldn't believe me anyway. With Gary back, my nights were anything but peaceful. He kept going until the middle of the night, with no signs of stopping. A wave of sadness washed over me. Men really can separate sex from love. Even though he was planning to propose to another woman, he could still entangle me in bed like this, endlessly. What a scumbag. I cursed Gary in my head. Before I could get my fill of cursing, he pinched my chin and demanded, "You dare to zone out at a time like this? Chloe Summers, you're getting bolder and bolder. And I still haven't settled the score with you for scrolling through those thirst trap videos." Earlier today, to keep Gary from finding out I'd been watching videos about him, I had refreshed my feed. Who knew the first video to pop up would be some shirtless guy with abs doing a suggestive dance? Gary's face had instantly turned thunderous. I suspect corporate espionage was at play, trying to frame me. I was so wronged. I wrapped my arms around Gary's neck, sobbing and begging for mercy. He ignored me, carrying me straight to the full-length mirror. I was sitting in his lap, facing the mirror. One of his hands was wrapped around my waist, the other gripping my chin, forcing me to look at our reflection. Then he nibbled my earlobe and whispered, "Watch closely and see how I fuck you." After the intense workout, I fell into a dead sleep. So I didn't notice when Gary, after I was asleep, secretly took out a ring and slipped it onto the ring finger of my left hand. He held my hand, examining it carefully for a moment before murmuring softly, "Seems a little too big. I'll have someone resize it tomorrow." He took the ring back and studied my sleeping face for a while longer. Then he reached out and pinched my cheek, saying through gritted teeth, "Chloe Summers, if you dare say no on the day I propose, you're dead." He thought, since she had abandoned him so cruelly back then, forcing her to marry him now and locking her by his side for a lifetime would be the best punishment. Yes. He was doing this purely to punish her, with no other inappropriate feelings mixed in. Gary lowered his eyes, silently repeating this to himself. I knew sleeping together this often would get me in trouble. Staring at the 2 lines on the pregnancy test, I let out a deep sigh. Gary always used protection. This could only have happened because a condom broke one time. He would definitely think I broke it on purpose to trap him with a baby, and he would despise me even more. Ugh, what do I do now? I crouched on the bathroom floor, pulling at my hair, on the verge of tears. The next second, the bathroom door opened. Gary frowned at me. "Chloe Summers, did you fall in? What's taking so long?" The moment I saw him, my heart leaped into my throat. I instinctively tossed the pregnancy test into the trash can. Gary walked over, looking at me with confusion. "What did you just throw in there?" As he spoke, he bent down to look into the trash. I rushed forward to stop him, pushing him toward the door. How can you be like this? I'm still using the toilet, how can you just barge in? Get out!" I shouted, feigning anger. Gary grabbed my wrist, raised an eyebrow, and said nonchalantly, "It's not the first time I've seen it. What's there to be shy about?" I stared at him, then replied in disbelief, Don't tell me you've spied on me in the bathroom before?" What a pervert. Seeing my horrified expression, Gary let out a chuckle. He leaned in close to my ear and said, enunciating every word, "Do I need to remind you about that night a few days ago, when you couldn't hold it, all over me? That shirt was brand new, and you ruined it. I haven't even billed you for the damages yet." My mind unwillingly flashed back to the X-rated movie that was that night. My cheeks instantly burned hot. But it was his fault that I... And now he was turning it around on me. How could anyone be so horrible? I glared at him furiously. Gary, unfazed, continued to tease me. What? Still can't remember? Let me give you a hint. At the time, you were. I quickly clapped a hand over his mouth. You, stop it. I said, flustered and mortified. Gary grinned, a triumphant twinkle in his eyes. I had to keep this pregnancy a secret. Gary was already planning to propose to his old flame. If he found out at this critical moment that I was secretly pregnant with his child, I couldn't even imagine how miserable my fate would be. I lay in bed, anxiously trying to figure out a plan. Just then, a strong arm wrapped around my waist. In an instant, I was pulled into a warm embrace that smelled of fresh soap. Gary's hot hand slipped under the hem of my pajama top, easily finding my breast. A shiver ran through me. The next second, Gary tilted my chin up and kissed me. Soon, I was dizzy and dazed from his kisses. It wasn't until he was about to move on to the next step that I suddenly remembered you're not supposed to have sex in the first trimester. I quickly grabbed Gary's hand and said breathlessly, "Can we not do it today?" "What's wrong?" "I'm not feeling very well today." I carefully glanced up at him, unsure if my excuse would work. Gary had a strong libido, and he was the kind of domineering person who always got his way. What if he tried to force me? Ah! I screamed silently in my head. Luckily, what I feared didn't happen. The moment I spoke, Gary's brows furrowed instantly. "Where don't you feel well?" he asked, his tone laced with anxiety. I looked at him and lied without batting an eye. "Just a little dizzy, and I've been feeling weak and tired all day. I'll call a doctor for you right now." With that, Gary sat up to grab his phone. Startled, I quickly grabbed his arm. "It's too late. Let's not bother anyone. It's probably nothing serious. I'll probably be fine after a good night's rest." Seeing my insistence on not calling a doctor tonight, Gary had no choice but to give up on the idea. I offered, how about I use my hand?" Gary answered decisively, "No." "Then, won't you be uncomfortable?" I couldn't help but ask, staring at his very alert member. The next second, everything went dark. Gary covered my eyes with his hand and tucked me into the blankets. "None of your business," he said coldly. "If you're not feeling well, then go to sleep." With that, he got up, snagged a piece of my lingerie from the closet, and walked into the bathroom. I was a little confused. What was he doing with my clothes? It wasn't until I heard a few hoarse gasps from the bathroom that I suddenly understood. Damn it. I can't wear that piece anymore. I just bought it, too. Ugh. The next day, Gary went on a business trip for an important project. I breathed a temporary sigh of relief. I heard that Mississippi Leon would be back in less than 2 weeks. Before then, Gary would probably talk to me about leaving. I waited and waited. I didn't get a notice to leave, only the return of Gary from his trip. At the dinner table, for some reason, the braised pork belly I usually loved tasted incredibly greasy today. The moment it touched my lips, I couldn't help but gag. "What's wrong?" Gary put down his chopsticks, walked over to me, and gently patted my back. I looked up at him. "The pork belly seems a little too oily today. Hasn't your period been late for a while?" Gary paused, then continued, "You're not pregnant, are you?" My eyes widened slightly in panic. How is that possible? You know we use protection every time. If I found out I was pregnant, I'd go to the hospital and get an abortion immediately. Don't worry, I have absolutely no desire to have your child. Really, no desire at all. I stared into Gary's eyes, my expression sincere. Maybe it was my imagination, but the atmosphere around him suddenly turned ice cold. He looked at me, his face blank. After a long moment, he finally curled his lip into a smirk. "You'd better mean that." With that, he didn't even finish his meal. He just turned and left without a backward glance. Gary didn't come home until very late. Just as I was about to go to sleep, I got a phone call. His assistant told me that Gary was drunk and refused to leave the bar, begging me to go pick him up and take him home. I quickly rushed to the bar the assistant had mentioned. When I found Gary, he was lying on a sofa. His eyes were shut tight, his cheeks flushed a deep red. Several empty wine bottles were on the table next to him. He'd clearly had a lot to drink. I walked over and gently pushed him. "Gary, wake up. It's late, let's go home." I pushed him a few more times. When he still didn't respond, I resorted to gently patting his cheek. Maybe I annoyed him. Gary suddenly grabbed my wrist and yanked me toward him with force. Caught off guard, I stumbled and fell on top of him. Then, with a swift movement, he flipped me over and pinned me underneath him. Gary frowned, his eyes hazy as he stared at me. "Who are you? Why are you hitting me?" "I'm Chloe Summers." "Chloe Summers?" Gary tilted his head, thinking for a moment. Then, his expression turned vicious. He practically spat the words through gritted teeth, "The person I hate most is Chloe Summers." I froze. A sharp pain, like a needle piercing my heart, shot through my chest. Gary pressed his body down, resting his forehead against my neck, and whispered over and over, "Chloe, I hate you. I hate you so much." I lowered my eyes, a lump forming in my throat. It took a while before I could manage a bitter, "Yeah, I know." A few warm tears suddenly fell onto my neck. Gary was sobbing as he told me he hated me. Perhaps he was tired. Gradually, his sobs subsided, and his voice grew weaker. "Chloe, your heart must be made of stone. Why? Why can't you just love me a little?" I didn't quite catch his last sentence. "What?" I asked instinctively. There was no response, only the sound of his even breathing in my ear. After that day, Gary didn't come home for several days. Soon, rumors started flying that Gary was busy setting up a proposal site, and that it was supposedly spectacular and dreamlike. After hearing this news, I quietly bought a plane ticket to Europe. Then, under the pretext of going out for a walk, I made a run for it. After several days of cooling off, Gary came to the miserable realization that he still couldn't let Chloe go. No matter how much he tried to brainwash himself, he couldn't fake what he felt in his heart. Because of one thing she said, he tossed and turned, unable to sleep for several nights. Even when he did sleep, a mocking, sarcastic voice would echo in his mind. How pitiful. The person you love doesn't love you at all. He had wanted to get revenge on her, but now it all felt meaningless. If he continued, he would only be torturing himself. He had it all figured out now. If he couldn't have her heart, then having her body would be enough. As long as she accepted his proposal, he would let go of the past completely. She had once told him that she only got close to him because his family was rich and powerful. And now, he was even wealthier than before. So he was confident that Chloe would say yes. She couldn't possibly hate him so much that she'd turn down the money just to escape from him. But as it turned out, he was wrong. When Gary, standing at the proposal site, received the news that Chloe had suddenly disappeared, he panicked. He instinctively called Javier, the head of the Rivera family, who had always been his rival. The moment the call connected, he roared, "Javier, you son of a bitch." Javier, who had just been woken up, was speechless. He glanced at the caller ID, then shot back, completely bewildered, "Dude, what did I do to you now? Do you have to call and curse me out first thing in the morning? Cut the crap. Hand over Chloe Summers." Javier was so mad he was wide awake. "Seriously, man? Is she with me? And you want me to hand her over? What do you think I am, a magician? You think I can pull a person out of thin air for you? Besides you, who else would dare to take her from right under my nose?" Gary gritted out. Javier just laughed, a bitter, angry sound. "Couldn't she have just left on her own? Don't blame me just because you can't keep your own woman." When the other end went silent, Javier sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "Gary, oh, Gary. You really are pathetic. You got dumped once before, and now you've been dumped again. TSK, TSK, TSK. She must really despise you to go to such lengths to get away from you." Gary gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breathing was ragged, and a sharp pain in his chest made it almost impossible to breathe, his consciousness fading. The call had been disconnected at some point. Gary leaned against the wall, slumping to the floor like a defeated dog. He sat in silence for a long time before finally clenching his fists, his eyes bloodshot, and muttering, "Chloe Summers, you better hope I don't find you." I moved to a small town. The scenery was beautiful, the air was fresh, and it was a perfect place to live. After dinner one evening, I went for a stroll in a nearby park. When I got tired, I found a bench to sit on. Many couples were also out for an evening walk together. Watching them, I couldn't help but think of Gary. How would he react when he found out I was gone? Probably not much of a reaction, right? After all, he'd said I was just his plaything. As I thought about it, a wave of sadness washed over me. But I quickly comforted myself out loud. Oh, don't be sad. What's so great about Gary, anyway? He's so moody and loves to torture people. The sooner you run, the sooner you can enjoy life. I have money now, I can find any handsome, obedient man I want. Oh. Is that so? Just as I finished speaking, a cold, familiar voice came from beside me. I instinctively looked up and met Gary's gaze. His eyes were dark and deep, his stare as cold and sharp as an icy blade, fixed on me without moving. I froze for a second, then shot up and bolted. Gary was 6'3" with legs for days. I hadn't even taken a few steps before he grabbed me, lifted me into his arms, and shoved me into his car. Gary took me to a secluded villa. My hands and feet were tied with ropes. I started to panic, not understanding why he had suddenly flown to another country to catch me. Could it be that he found out about the baby and was going to get rid of it himself? I thought, my anxiety spiraling. It wasn't until Gary threw me onto the soft, large bed, my body bouncing on the mattress, that I snapped back to my senses. Gary, this is kidnapping. I can sue you for this. He just smirked, his face a blank mask. Oh. That's assuming you can. I stared at him with wide eyes. What do you want? Gary let out a cold laugh. The next second, the buttons on my shirt were ripped open. He grabbed my neck, bent down, and crushed his lips against mine. He kissed me so fiercely, so urgently, that he left me no room to breathe. It was as if he wanted to devour me whole. The feeling of suffocation was unbearable. In desperation, I bit down hard on his tongue. He pulled back with a pained grunt, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. His eyes, now fixed on me, were shrouded in a heavy darkness. Gary gently wiped away the blood with his thumb, then kissed me again. The taste of blood spread between my lips. He relentlessly teased my sensitive spots, and within moments, my body went limp. I don't know how much time passed before he finally let me go. I glared at him with tear-reddened eyes, tears continuously streaming from the corners. Seeing this, Gary became even more furious. He gripped my chin, his eyes bloodshot, a vein throbbing at his temple. Does my touch revolt you that much? I looked at him and shouted, "You're about to propose to your old flame, so what are you doing with me?" Gary shot back angrily, "I'm about to propose to my old flame, so who else would I come looking for?" I was stunned, unable to process the logic in his words for a moment. What did he mean? Did he want me to stay by his side as his mistress? The thought made me even more furious. Gary Vance, you scumbag. I'm telling you, I will never be your mistress again. If you insist on this, then I'll go expose you to your precious old flame. Expose yourself to yourself? Fine, go ahead. What? Gary's old flame, was me? I froze for a second, then said, "Aren't you proposing to Riley Leong?" Gary laughed, an incredulous look on his face as if what I'd said was absurd. Who told you that? My voice grew weaker. Everyone's saying it. Gary pinched my cheek hard. What do you have this mouth for? Couldn't you have just asked me? I shot back, my eyes red and defiant. How could I dare to ask? You were the one who said you hated me and told me not to get any ideas. After I said that, the air went still. Gary and I stared at each other in silence. After a moment, we both spoke at the same time. I'm sorry. For some reason, we both suddenly started laughing. Maybe it was because we were both celebrating the fact that the person we had fallen for at first sight, after all these years of twists and turns, still loved us back. I held my tied hands out to Gary. I pouted, complaining, "It hurts. Untie me. I hope it hurts like hell." Though he said that, he quickly untied the ropes and gently massaged my reddened wrists. I tried to sound casual as I asked him, "So, that thing about proposing to me, is it for real?" "Gary, no. But you just said you were." "I changed my mind. Can't I?" Gary looked up at me, his tone serious. "Chloe Summers, I'm not ready to forgive you that quickly." Hearing that, I immediately put my hands together in a prayer. "Please, I beg you. You're a bigger person than me, so please forgive your humble servant." "Humph." Gary crossed his arms like a petulant little princess and turned his head away from me. I reached out and took his arm. "Can you please stop being mad? Don't touch me." Gary shook my hand off. Seeing this, I had no choice but to lean in and plant a loud smack of a kiss on his lips. "Still mad?" A lovely blush began to spread across Gary's cheeks and ears. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Not enough," he said, his voice hoarse. Seeing that it was working, I quickly wrapped my arms around his neck, tilted my head up, and kissed him. This time, I was on the offensive while he passively responded. The quiet room was filled with the soft, wet sounds of our kissing. I don't know how long we kissed. When we finally parted, both Gary and I were slightly breathless. I pressed my forehead against his, my eyes sincere. "Gary Vance, I like you. I've liked you since the first moment I saw you, and that hasn't changed in all these years. I'm so sorry for leaving you back then. My father threatened me with my mother's medical bills, so I had no choice. But no matter what, I still hurt you. So when you said you hated me and wanted revenge, I understood." Tears instantly welled up in Gary's eyes. He leaned in to kiss me. With a push of his hands, he pinned me to the bed. Although I also wanted to melt into him after clearing up our misunderstanding, my concern for the baby made me grab his wandering hands. My eyes welled up with forced back tears as I struggled to say, we can't." Gary nibbled at my neck, rubbing against me. His voice was low and seductive. "But baby, I'm desperate. Please give it to me." "No, it'll hurt the baby." "What?" Gary shot up, his face a picture of disbelief. This sudden news almost knocked him out. He grabbed my shoulders, confirming, "You're pregnant?" "Emichim." I nodded. With a baby in the picture, he probably wouldn't be as mad at me anymore, I thought. But the next second, I heard him say, "If I hadn't come after you, were you going to take my child and marry someone else? Not only that, you were going to make my child call another man daddy." I said sheepishly, How could I?" Gary's eyes were red with anger. "Don't try to argue. You think I didn't hear what you said earlier?" I was suddenly speechless. Seeing me silent, he continued, "So you admit it? Fine, Chloe Summers. You're really something. Damn it." I just managed to calm him down, and now he's mad again. That night, Gary didn't say a single word to me. The next morning, I had just gotten out of bed when I started searching on Pinterest for tutorials on how to appease your boyfriend. After picking a few methods I thought were promising, I rubbed my hands together, eager to try them out. But after wandering around the house for a while, I couldn't find him. Where did he go? The second after I said that, I turned my head and saw Gary squatting in the laundry room. He was washing clothes with a completely blank expression. The item he was scrubbing in his hands was. It was the panties I had changed out of yesterday. Could this be the legendary washing her underwear with a stone-cold face? When I returned to New York with Gary and saw the proposal site he had prepared for me, my jaw dropped. I couldn't help but tease him for being so extravagant. Gary frowned, confused. But you're the one who said you wanted to be proposed to in a castle full of flowers. That was so long ago. If I remember correctly, I was only in the 6th grade. At the time, I was reading a novel where the female lead was proposed to in a similar setting. As a little girl full of romantic fantasies, I told Gary that he had to propose to me in a place like that someday. I never thought he would remember those words for so long. Gary and I had a low-key wedding. At the wedding, the rumored old flame of Gary, Riley Leong, also came. The moment I saw him, I was completely stunned. He had long black hair, striking features, and was very tall. Dressed in an androgynous outfit, he exuded a beauty that transcended gender. But this beautiful person, when he opened his mouth, spoke in a deep baritone. I was shocked again. I quietly tugged on Gary's sleeve and whispered, "Is he?" Before I could finish, Riley smiled at me and said, "I'm a guy." I finally understood why Gary had looked at me with such an absurd expression when I said he was proposing to Riley Leong. After Riley left, I stared at his back, completely dazed. Gary called my name several times, but I didn't snap out of it. I swallowed hard. "So beautiful." Gary said angrily, "Is he that good-looking?" I nodded. "Yes." He clapped a hand over my eyes. "You're not allowed to look." I grabbed his hand, anxious. Let go, I haven't gotten a good enough look yet." Gary almost fainted from anger. He scooped me up by my legs, hoisting me over his shoulder, then gave me but a firm slap. "Keep looking and I'll spank your ass raw," he said viciously. He carried me all the way to the bedroom. After placing me on the bed, he pulled off his tie and used it to bind my hands. "Chloe Summers, it seems you'll never learn to listen unless I punish you properly." It had been a while, and I was feeling a little needy, too. But out of concern for the baby, I still said, "Is this okay?" The baby. Gary kneaded my chest while biting my earlobe. "It's been 3 months. We're fine. Besides, have you ever heard the saying?" His hand roamed restlessly under my dress. The corners of my eyes turned red as I said in broken phrases, what saying?" Gary let out a low chuckle and said, enunciating every word, "They say a good paddling makes for a good kid."